Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This program is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday evening, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and broadcast out of the beautiful Monticello, Maine studios of WBCQ. I'm excited about our guest tonight, Catherine White, but before I introduce her, I'd like to just talk a little bit about Camp Constitution. Our Camp Constitution is a not-for-profit, all-volunteer organization of Americanist patriots that, among other things, has this radio show. It runs a week-long summer camp in the town of at the Toa-Nippie Christian Retreat Center in Rindge, New Hampshire. This year's camp, 2015, will run from July 12th to the 19th, and Catherine White will be one of our instructors. It'll be her first year at camp. In addition to Catherine White, we're going to have Mrs. Chris Ann Hall, who is a constitutionalist expert, travels around the country. This will be her second year. Mr. Tom DeWeese of the American Policy Center will be another instructor, and a whole list of others. Dr. Sam Blumenfeld, a pioneer in the homeschool movement, will also be. I just got that confirmation today. Outside of the classes that we have from these great instructors, we will be taking a full-day field trip to the site of the Boston Tea Party in the Boston Tea Party Museum, as well as a trip to the State House, a hike up Mount Monadnock, and all kinds of other great things. It's a family camp. Families, full families, little children, babies, all the way up to grandma and grandpa are welcome to this camp. So go to campconstitution.net. I had this nagging cough. It's had it for a couple of weeks now. Anyway, campconstitution.net, where you can find this information. Also, if you go to our website, you can see some of the books that we've published. You can visit our bookstore, our camp bookstore, and we just recently published a book called Gems from the Gem Years. It's the story of the history of this excellent organization called Guardians of Education in Maine. That was actually fighting Common Core type programs long before it was called Common Core. And we're actually going to have a time for the author in Rockland, Maine, March 21st at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Rockland Library. And you're welcome if you're listening to this and live in the state of Maine or nearby. It'd be a great time. We're going to honor this lady. She's 93 years of age, and she's just been an incredible force for good, not just in Maine, but around the country. Anyway, our guest is on the line. Let me introduce her first. And as quickly, Catherine White was a Facebook friend of mine, and I met her for the first time at a Tom Woods rally, not a rally, but a function that Tom Woods was speaking last spring, I believe it was. So let me just read her very impressive bio before I bring her on there. Catherine White is a Massachusetts native and a graduate of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where she earned her degree in Earth, Planetary, and Atmospheric Sciences and was on the MIT varsity pistol team. After a number of years as an engineer, she switched tracks and has had her own accounting and tax business since 1997. About a half a dozen years ago, a book club with friends turned into a second full-time career as a constitutional scholar, author, and lecturer. She has spoken at tax day rallies, various civic and political groups, has been part of panels discussing the Constitution with Pacific Rim countries for the State Department, with a contingent from the government of the Netherlands, and was featured on an episode of the BBC series Almost Royal. And she actually has a website. She lives in Lexington, near the birthplace of the American Revolution. Her website is www.constitutiondecoded.com. Good evening, Catherine.
Evening.
Well, I'm glad you can make it on our show, and we're also looking forward to having you at our camp. I think your class can be concerned with how the Declaration of Independence led to the Constitution. Sort of the transition. Here's the Declaration now, and the next step was the Constitution. I was very impressed by at your debate that you had early January in Boston, Massachusetts. You debated a gentleman on the subject of an Article 5 convention. You took the position, which I take very strongly, that we should not have one, at least not, in my opinion, not for at least a generation, if not more. Mr. Tom Weaver was the man advocating Article 5 convention. And well, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And what I'd like to do is to talk to you a little bit about your the class you do, because you see, I think the solution isn't amending the Constitution. The solution is doing what you do on a voluntary basis, and what many other people do is teaching the principles of the Constitution. So tell us kind of what got you into this class, or into doing this, and kind of the results you're having.
Well, what got me into doing it was a few friends of mine and I had wanted to read Cleon Skousen's book, The 5,000-Year Leap, which goes into the principles that underlie the Constitution. And none of us, life intervenes. We weren't getting around to it. And I said, you know what? I'll get a room at the library, and we'll just have a little meeting, and we'll go through it and discuss it. And this was greeted with alacrity, and we proceeded to do that. And in short order, and when I say short order, I mean within a year, I went from having two friends at the library to having, probably within a year it was only a dozen and a half or 2 dozen, but it's since gotten up to 4 dozen people a month at a Constitution study group that I actually get space at the Woburn Sportsmen's Association now, because we outgrew the library space very quickly. And that's been going on for about a half a dozen years.
Well, that's the people you're influencing. You'll never know the exact impact, because the folks that are coming to your classes are going out and about in their circles, hopefully influencing many others. Let me just touch upon Cleon Skousen. He passed away, I think he was in his mid-90s. I'm guessing about, 7 or 8, maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah. It was just before I discovered his books. He'd only been gone a couple of years at that time. But what he did was he traveled the country teaching the Constitution. And I'm sort of tied to a desk between January and April because of being a tax
business. I actually had the pleasure.
I'll go anywhere to talk about the Constitution.
I had the pleasure of listening to Mr. Skousen. He was up in years, and one of his sons was there. He was speaking at the New Hampshire Center for Constitutional Studies, and his group was the National Center for Constitutional Studies, which I think is based in Idaho. And one of the things they make available are a little handbook, a little pocket Constitution.
Oh yes, $35 for 100 postpaid. I buy several cases a year.
Well, we usually get 1,000 at a time for Camp Constitution, and we do that. And if you get 1,000, I think it's $250 postpaid.
I don't.
But it's medium mail. What we do is we always put these out. We have information tables at homeschool shows and county fairs and a few other venues, and just in our travels. I don't have a cough button on. This isn't a studio here, so I'm sorry if you have to hear me cough here and there. But anyway, and these little constitutions, they have some quotes from the founders and quotes from people, who have a great admiration for the Constitution. And when people say, "Gee," and it's amazing how few people know anything about this great liberty document. I call it the owner's manual for a free country. Several years ago, I was a guest panelist at the Keene State College. There was a lady who was at that time was a state rep, Jen Coffey, and she and I were the two liberty types. There was someone from the ACLU there. There was a moderate professor, a liberal professor, and somebody who thought he was a conservative. About 150 students and some others from the area, and they put a copy of the Constitution on each chair, prior to anyone coming in. And we all had a little opening statements. It really wasn't a debate in any strict sense. It was just us discussing our particular thoughts on various aspects of the Constitution. And I said to the students, some of you will leave this room and you're going to leave your constitutions, your freedom manuals. They said, that's because you really don't want them and you really don't care enough. I said, but I'm going to pick them up and give them to people who do care. Well, not one constitution was left on any of those seats. But it was one of the best times I ever had. Now, let me ask you, when you started, I'm sure you've learned a lot even as a teacher. Teachers learn not only from the students, but they have to learn things because they have to be up on things. What was your level of understanding 6 or 7 years ago compared to what it is now?
Awfully close to zero. I actually had a class in high school that they called Comparative Political Systems, where we supposedly studied and compared the constitutions of the United States and the USSR.
Oh, really? That must have been interesting, huh?
It was, but here's the thing: is I asked the teacher what the difference was between a democracy and a republic.
Yeah.
And she didn't know.
Well, I'm not surprised. Of course, one of the things that we've long contended, that this is a republic, not a democracy. And, in fact, we actually reprinted a speech by Robert Welch. It's available on our Scrib page and also on our Camp Constitution Press online bookstore. Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution guarantees all states a Republican form of government. It's got nothing to do with a party. It has anything to do with republic, which is grouse poopy style the
Party didn't exist at that point in time.
No, it did not. Of course not. And if you read the Federalist Papers, which I'm sure you have, Federalist 10, James Madison said that democracies have been everywhere spectacles of turbulence and contention, short in their lives and violent in their deaths. And there was this one joke where someone would say, what's the difference between a republic and a people's republic? That's like saying the difference between a chair and an electric chair. There's no such thing. People's republic. But the word democracy means demokratia, and in Greek the people's rule, the people's strength. And it sounds nice. Gee, a majority rule doesn't sound nice and fair.
Well,
but
that's a lynch mob. You've just defined a lynch mob.
Exactly. And it's amazing that so few people. Now, if I'm setting up a table at a homeschool show, I would say half of them get it right, maybe a little more than half. If it's a venue like a county fair where you have a sort of a cross section of people, most people will say democracy. Most people, when you ask them who's your member of Congress, House Representatives or Senator, they won't know. They will agree with you that we shouldn't have Obamacare, we shouldn't have illegal aliens coming into our country, and all these other issues. And then you say, well, sign our petition to your member of Congress. Who is that? They look at you like they don't even understand the concept. And I'll never forget one lady. We had a petition to repeal Obamacare. And she worked for a company that makes medical equipment in Keene, New Hampshire. And she said that if this goes through, I'm probably going to be out of a job because my company can't compete because I think at some point with it, there's like a 5 or 10% tax. And I said, well, who's your member of Congress? She didn't know. And her member of Congress at the time voted for Obamacare. I said, I guarantee you, all the people in your district that want Obamacare, it was a lady at the time, I can't remember her name, they know exactly how they feel on the subject or how they think on the subject, but you don't. And it's going to cost you your job. So your employee, the person you paid, your taxes paid to represent you, will vote against your interest, not just vote against your interest, but probably vote against your job. And you don't know who's going to scolding her. This is an adult. We're not talking about a 10-year-old. We're talking about a lady who was in her 30s. And I think our politicians like it that way. I think they like voters to be ignorant.
They certainly do, because that lets them keep on raiding the till.
One of the things one of the most nauseating things to listen to during a campaign are these stupid ads. And millions of dollars are spent, billions of dollars are spent by super PACs and by the campaigns themselves to appeal to the lowest common denominator of the voter. And it's so insulting. I remember one back, I think it was John Sununu in New Hampshire. I don't know if he was running, if it was the son or the father, but this commercial there was some scandal he may have had some knowledge of, and the man says, the voiceover, Sununu. I thought, oh my goodness, if the founders were alive today, they would want to have this guy, drawn and quartered. I couldn't believe how ridiculous and how, obviously they didn't want to draw and quarter them. I'm, being facetious here, but I just can't believe how they appealed to the most to 8th grade, actually elementary school, there are probably 5-year-olds that are offended by that. And that's what they think the average voter is. They just don't know anything. It was interesting. There's a 10-question quiz that we put together, Camp Constitution, and Scott Brown at the time was running for the U.S. Senate in New Hampshire, unsuccessfully won the nomination for the party, but he wouldn't take this 10-question quiz. He wouldn't go near it. He kind of back like it was, like a vampire backing away from garlic. It was really funny because he probably would have got most of them wrong. Questions
I had
like
a chance to speak to Scott Walker when he was running for the Senate in Massachusetts.
Scott Brown, you mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Scott Brown. Don't mind me. I'm really bad with names. Scott Brown. And I went up to him and I asked him point blank, do you understand and will you abide by the constitutional limits on government as stated in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, which you will be swearing to uphold? And he looked me straight in the eye and said, yes.
Really? Like he knew what it was?
No, he didn't know what it was. He just knew how to be a politician.
Oh, exactly. And, of course, there's also something called the state constitution.
Yes.
And that's even more of an arcane. Now, do you discuss that at your study group?
We do not discuss the Massachusetts Constitution at the group. We always have plenty of questions about the federal one, and frankly, I've never. The original idea, I think, was that we were going to do the federal Constitution and then move on to the state Constitution. Well, I haven't got there yet.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the Constitution, I've done study groups in the past, and even recently, there's a great 6-series set called The Constitution is the Solution, done by a man named Robert Brown from Idaho, and he goes into the fundamentals, what kind of that we're a republic, not a democracy. And he goes into some of the Bill of Rights. And what's important, a lot of people who say that I have a constitutional right to do this or to do that. And as we point out at Camp Constitution, you don't have a constitutional right. You have a right protected by the Constitution.
Enumerated and protected by.
Exactly, enumerated and protected. Exactly, that's exactly what it is.
The Declaration says, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable, inherent, inseparable rights. Because if a document gives you your rights, another document can take them away.
Now, contrast
our rights
the U.S.
predate and supersede the Constitution.
That's why a lot of folks get caught up in the verbiage of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary for defense of a free state. And you can talk to my friend and colleague Dan McGonigal and say we really don't have a militia in the sense that it used to be as a National Guard, and it's not really what it was supposed to be. And Congress messed that up 100 years ago. I think it was, in my opinion, it was to use the National Guard to put them overseas when we became an empire in the late 1800s, Spanish-American War. But that's a topic for another time.
I have a complete essay on that on my website if you care.
Do you really? Oh, give out your website again.
It's www.constitutiondecoded.com, all one word.
And just let me mention now that we're about 20 minutes into the show that this is Camp Constitution Radio. That's heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday evening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've got to give the Eastern Standard Time because this show is heard around the world, and who knows where someone might be picking it up. And by the way, if you're interested in our camp program, it doesn't matter where you may live. We do our utmost to accommodate you. Well, we can't give you a first-class ticket to fly to Boston, but we'll pick you up at the airport, train station. If you're living somewhere in the South or Midwest, we have folks that are driving, and we may be able to help carpool or somehow get you there. We do have tuition assistance for people. We've never turned away any worthy camper or family for lack of funds. And so www.campconstitution.net is where you get information about our camp program and some of the other things we're doing. And our goal, we've had this camp now, we've been running camp since 2009. We just have one camp. We added a day. Last year, we have people say, let's make it 2 weeks, let's make it 3 weeks. Well, we got to take time off from work, so it's kind of hard to do when you do stuff like that. But we would like to see other camps like this pop up in other parts of the country. It doesn't have to be a whole week. It could be a weekend. It could be a winter camp. And we'd be more than happy to help anybody who is interested. And take some work and a little bit of funds, but, things that are worthwhile, that's what require a little bit of elbow grease. We have had inquiries over the years. People call and say, we want to do something like that here in California, someone in Texas, somebody in Virginia. I actually traveled to Virginia a few years ago to visit a friend who's become my friend, Sandy Sanders, and he was hoping to get one down there. And I think at some point it will happen, and I'm hoping that we can have a whole string of them, or even better, have a facility and have a year-round program, not just for it's for families, for young people, for adults. And I tell you, we have adults that come to the camp that learn a whole lot too. We encourage adults are in the classes; they're learning stuff they haven't learned before, and we also are trying to make not just to learn, but we're trying to create the next generation of freedom activists, while at the same time making those active, creating those today. So we have a lot of folks that will come there and they'll learn, not only will they learn great things and a lot of fellowship and friendship, but also how to be an effective freedom activist today. And we do need our share of them. We don't have enough of them. There are plenty of people out there promoting socialism. They're activists for the worst kinds of things, but not enough of us are out there. And we also have something we actually like to name the problem. We name the enemies. And we don't just say it's the progressives or it's this group. We mention how it happens. How do we get in this mess? It didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to be defeated overnight or an election cycle. So anyway, that's the plug for our camp. So Catherine, what do you start off with when someone comes to your class? Do you focus on the Bill of Rights? Do you focus on any one part of the Constitution, or?
Well, the classes are about 2 hours. And we start every class with words of treason and heresy.
Really?
Treason and heresy straight from the Declaration of Independence, because it was treason against the king, and that made it heresy because he was the head of the Church of England.
That's right, yeah.
We also talk about the preamble to the Constitution, and we talk about the basic difference between rights and privileges, because one of the tools that the statists use is that they conflate the concepts of right and privilege, and they are opposites. A right is something that is inherent in you. A privilege is granted and can be revoked.
Let me ask you, in your opinion, is a driver's license a privilege or a right?
The right to travel is a right. That's actually a really subtle question.
Yes,
on whether or not a driver's license is a privilege or a right, and you then have to get into the concept of the public roadways and sort of the state of public goods and how to regulate that and make sure that they are safe for people so that they can use their right of travel safely.
Right.
So that's actually kind of a bad example to start with. A good example to start with would be health care. Harry Reid said, we're going to give them the right to health care. Well, first of all, government doesn't give you any rights. You are born with rights. And all rights are based on property, starting with the very first piece of property you ever own the day you're born, your own body. Because if you cannot control what happens to your body, you are a slave.
Mm-hmm. So
your property, your body, it's your right to do with it as you wish, and part of that right comes the responsibility. It's twinned in there with the responsibility to take care of it, and part of that would be health care. So is health care a right? Well, who owns the property? You own your body. Do you own the medical school education? Do you own the laboratory equipment? Do you own the chemical reagents for the testing? Do you own the EKG machines? Do you own? No, you don't own any of that. So it's not a right. It's not a right. It's a commodity. It's a commodity. And if you can compel somebody to take care of you because health care is your right, what you are actually saying is that you believe in slavery. You believe in enslaving people and forcing them to serve your needs.
I remember I was at
exactly the level of it. It is slavery. If you say that health care is a right, you are saying you believe in slavery.
I was at a healthcare forum some years ago, and there was a lady with an English accent, obviously coming from a socialist country, and she thought it was horrible and terribly immoral to make money off people's sickness. And I chirped in and I said, is it terribly immoral to make money off people's hunger? And she didn't know what to say. I said, well, if you said that, that means every restaurant, every supermarket, any place, any farmer is somehow doing something immoral when they make a profit off of growing food or selling food or preparing food. And so it was kind of an absurd thing. That
Robert Heinlein, the author, said that money is the universal symbol for value received.
Right, that's a good point. He was the science fiction writer.
He was a science fiction writer. The
there's another
symbol for value. So if you have received value, that is worth money.
That is worth money. We got about 4 minutes.
Money. What is money? Money is a fungible, interchangeable proxy for human effort.
That's right.
Okay, it is man hours or man years. So money is the expression of someone else's or your efforts. So by saying that it's immoral to charge money for health care, what you're also saying is that it's immoral, which is very, very, very silly charge. It would be immoral to receive compensation for expending your life's energy for someone else. Again, it comes down to slavery.
It was interesting, too, that these folks who I would call them humanists that reject certain concepts of right and wrong would love to use that word immoral and moral to advance their goals. We only got a couple of minutes left. There's another thing that I like to bring out here, the difference between a power and a right, because the Constitution grants certain powers to various elements of the government. So, but I don't believe they grant rights to the government. The rights are to the people.
Because rights are given to us by our Creator as natural people. If a community does not have rights because there is no such thing as a community, there are individuals. A government does not have rights because it is not its own entity. It is a structure that's built in order to administer certain aspects of a civil society. Rights are inherent in humans as individuals, and only as individuals. And this is one of the amazing things about the Constitution and the Declaration, it states sovereign power is inherent in the people. So we take this creation of ours, this structure that we created through the Constitution, and we charge it with certain responsibilities, and we give it enough power to actually carry out those responsibilities. I mean, you can't say to somebody, it's your responsibility to shovel snow off the walk, and by the way, I'm not giving you a shovel. Right? If you're going to tell somebody you have to shovel the walkway, you have to make a shovel available to them. So
we're down to under a minute.
We create the government, we give it enough power to do its job, and no more. And it usurps power. And we have to stop it.
Give out your website one more time.
www.constitutiondecoded.com.
Well, that was a fast half hour. Catherine, I want to thank you for coming on, and we'll see you down the road, and God bless you. You're listening to Constitution Radio on WBCQ The Planet. Good night.